Hello, I'm Marco Chigani, and this is Straight Talk. With me today are two people, two guests. Stephen Wong, our Hong Kong Foundation. You've been here before. Kevin Choi, first time on this show. You're an economics professor. Now, tomorrow on Wednesday, the chief executive will be giving her policy speech. Now, let me ask you first, Professor. Right. What do you want her to say? I mean, I don't think she's going to talk about politics. I think she'll focus more on the economic issues in Hong Kong. There is our reserves are getting less and less. What do you think she should say?
I agree with you that at this point, it's not that relevant to talk much about politics. And the focus should be on the economy. But then I'm not sure at this point whether spending too much time to worry about the reserve is the right way to do, because that's going to
our reserves have gone down quite a lot.
Yeah, that's what's happening. But then, because the fundamental cause for that drying up of the reserve is because of the COVID-19. So the key thing is, as long as and then that's closely related to the economy, that's happening all over the world. Okay, so as long as the government can really control the threat of the virus, then the economy is going to pick up. So I think the focus should be more on how to deal with the pandemic. And once it's under control, because now the so-called fourth wave is coming.
The fourth wave has arrived.
Right.
But then the U.S. said that there's going to be a vaccine sometime next month.
Yeah, they will have it. So
but we won't.
The question is whether we're going to have it as well. And even the U.S. can have it. To what extent they're going to make it available to the general public, being everyone can use it, that's another question, even in the U.S.
Now, Mr. Wong, as Kevin said, that we have to focus on the pandemic and the economy can wait. How long can we wait?
No, they're closely related, obviously. And one thing about economy that I focus on, to answer your question, what I want to expect from the policy.
What do you want her to say? What do you want Chief Executive to say?
Jobs. And how do you create? How do you create jobs? Obviously, with the unemployment rate still now at 6.4%, but a lot of people are projecting it to rise higher, right, in the next few quarters. It depends on the pandemic control. So the question is, how do you create jobs? And my answer to that is that I was hoping to invest a bit more into infrastructure. Because in Hong Kong, as you know, right, the traffic congestion is getting worse, right? If you look at, for example, West Railway, every morning people are getting, packed like sardines to the trains, inside the train. So we have been underinvesting into infrastructure for the past decade. So what I would argue, though, is that if you can, for example, kickstart the planned infrastructure, such as Northern Link Railway that connect the West Railway and the East Railway.
But those jobs will come a long time later, right? Because
yes and no, because actually these projects that I just talked about, NOL, the Northern Link, they have been planned and consultation. All the work was done, and you can actually start when there is a will there. So a lot of projects has been on the table, has been on the drawing board for 10 years.
Why haven't they started it?
Well, that's a question that I would love to be answered.
Now, Professor, let me ask you this. Jobs is what Mr. Wong said. We should have more jobs. And the pandemic and the economy are very closely linked.
Right.
When do you see Hong Kong's economy bouncing back to when it was? And what can the chief executive do tomorrow in terms of policy to make the economy come back?
Okay.
Now, in China, apparently the economy has improved a lot.
So in the first place, I agree with Stephen that those infrastructure needs to be done anyway. So, and there's no harm to do it regardless how we deal with the pandemic. But then as an economist, what I want to focus on the way the government should deal with the pandemic is because so far the way the government fight the pandemic, I don't see there's much economics behind that. So economists indeed should have a say.
What do you mean?
Well, the way we think about policy to fight the pandemic is not purely just a science problem in the sense, oh, we just listen to the physician. They have their input, but then since this is not just a problem about the pandemic, but it's about the economy as well. So I think the government should listen to economists as well. Now, let me tell you, so far, okay, there are 3 ways to fight the pandemic, okay? The first way is just complete lockdown. It has some success, okay, but then the cost is very high. And we don't want to do it again and again. Okay?
Mainland China did it.
Yeah, they did it, okay? And then the second way is called a herd immunity. Academia talks about it, and looks like from the experience that I've observed so far, not very successful. And then the last way is so-called testing and isolate. So you do a lot of testing, universal tests. The government's been considering doing that. But then this is not going to be the one-time thing. You have to do it consistently. You do the testing, if not universal, as much as people you can get. And then once you find anyone with the being test positive, just isolate them immediately. And this is an approach, to me, it's make a lot of economic sense, because by doing that, we can avoid shutting down the whole economy. And right now, what we've been doing is like, okay, whenever there's a wave, and then we almost shut down a lot of stuff. So the restaurants, the restaurant, F&B, and a lot of business are forced to shut down because of that. And then they're not coming back.
Well, yeah,
so that's about the jobs. And this is kind of job that, even though we do this infrastructure, I mean, even construction workers are not going to work in, I mean, F&B workers not going to work in a construction site. It's difficult for them to make that transition in the short run. So I think we need to do both.
Stephen, now, the professor mentioned complete lockdown is not possible in Hong Kong, as you know, right? I mean, we're not going to have a complete lockdown of the city. Herd immunity, people have, the professionals have said that that's not the way out, right? To get everybody infected so that nobody gets infected again, that's not the way out. There's a lot of argument in places, especially like the US and in Europe, that the cure cannot be worse than the disease. In other words, if you shut down the economy to fight the virus, then people still suffer. What would you prefer? What would you prefer our government to do? Our government seems to be reactive rather than proactive. When they open up a little bit, and then when people get sick again, then they shut it down again. Is that the right policy?
No, I agree with Kevin that it is a interdisciplinary issue. It's both the public health officials as well as, for example, economists or behavioral psychologists really have to work together to understand and pilot test. So it is a global problem, right? In the US, as you said, or in the other advanced countries, they also have these problems that is much bigger than Hong Kong, right? So, and if you look at mainland, obviously they have done a good job to really clear it out, and people are resuming to a large degree normal economic activities and daily life. So I think there's obviously something to learn from both sides. I think it is a crucial issue to deal with.
Now, I know you care a lot. You've been here before. You care a lot about housing. You care a lot about livelihood issues. You mentioned jobs, create jobs with infrastructure projects. That's a long-term issue. Immediate jobs. What should our chief executive say tomorrow to ease livelihood issues? Because livelihood is, politics aside, livelihood issues, that's something that a lot of people care about. Being able to get good jobs, to have social mobility. They care about that.
Yeah, I think jobs obviously is important. Also, the fact that housing is important. Particularly now, we're talking about the dichotomy between have assets and those who don't have assets, particularly properties and housing. And one thing that we really think that government should do is resume the tenant purchase scheme, meaning that allowing to give the options to those who are living in the public housing
to buy it,
to have the opportunity to buy it.
We've talked about this for years.
For affordable. Well, they have done it before. Yes. And I think now, especially, you talk about fiscal deficit, and what is a better way to actually recoup some of the, from the government perspective, some of the money by selling the asset, public housing, that is there, that is not generating income anyway, because the rent they receive is not enough to, for the maintenance costs, right? So you are basically allowing...
The pandemic housing prices haven't really gone down that much.
Yeah, so I think it is, which is especially why, you should allow those people who are already living in the rental housing to have the opportunity to have their own flat at an affordable price.
Well, as an economist, why is it that, the jobless rate is now above 6%, and property prices have dropped a little bit, commercial prices have, but residential prices haven't. And people actually are still going out to buy homes. And then the property developers are raising the prices. Is this an unsolvable problem? In SARS, prices did drop, but not this time. Why?
Well, if it drops, it's just create another problem. So I don't think the economy, the government, we want to see a significant drop in housing price either. So the way, ideally, what we want to have is that housing price kind of not dropping dramatically, but not rising. Hopefully, the growth of GDP wage is higher than the growth in housing prices. Otherwise, people are going to go bankrupt, and we have this negative asset, all kinds of problem, and people are going to suicide and stuff like that. And that's what we don't see as well. That's from the past what we learned. So I think as an economist, the answer has to be about supply, but that's kind of long-term solution.
Yep.
And we need to do that. Long-term solution doesn't mean that we need to wait until long-term. We need to act immediately because it takes a long time to work it out. So we need to act immediately. But then the effect is going to kind of spread over time.
All right.
And then for the short-term problem, it's huge as well because this pandemic, you look at stock market.
I'll take a quick break first, okay? Sure. See you soon, don't go away. Thanks for staying with us. This is Straight Up. With me today is Professor Kevin Tsui and Stephen Wong. Now, Kevin, I interrupted you before the break. You were talking about housing, whether it's affordable or not. What is the solution there?
Well, there are two problems in here that we have to remember. One is about the inequality. The other is about living. Okay, the living problem. We need to build more houses, bigger houses, because even though we have enough units, as some people claim, the per household area is so small. So the number, the land we need, the houses we need, infrastructure we need is enormous. So we need to do, as I said earlier on, as a long-term problem, but then long-term problem that it takes time to work it out. So we need to act immediately, as soon as possible. That's land supply. The other problem is inequality. And inequality is about the expectation that whether housing prices are going to keep rising. And that's rising relative to the wage rate. And that's a problem that potentially has a short-term solution, because this is, for the most part, it's kind of financial problem, more so than housing problem. And people get upset, not so, in addition to their living in a kind of packed, small space, but also that it's going to exacerbate a problem with inequality. Though with that, they keep accumulating, and then their wealth grows much faster than those without a home.
That is a long-term thing again.
Right.
Now, Stephen, I know you you talked about land supply too, and I know you support Land Out Tomorrow. I think the chief executive will mention that in her policy speech. Now, there's a lot of discussion about whether we should go ahead or we should not go ahead. As we all know, our reserves have gone down. Some people say that we should not be wasting money, a lot of money, on such a huge project, which some people say it's a white elephant, and it's a long-term thing. But you still support it. Why?
Well, first of all, I think that we need to, I think 38 economists actually come out and say that this is a worthwhile project from a financial perspective, that they're going to recoup.
We can afford it.
We can afford
this thing.
And then if you look, for example, the Institute of Surveyors, who are, obviously associate professionals, that actually would argue that this thing will more than enough to recoup of the cost. And obviously, we amortize the cost over time, right? We don't spend the cost immediately.
This Land Out Tomorrow is, you talk about decades away, right?
Right, which is exactly what Kevin mentioned before. We had a long-term problem, which is why we start now. We had this problem right now is because for the 2 decades, we actually have no new towns. People really confused about making land as if like making small pieces of land, I call sites, a couple thousands of apartments, versus new towns like what we had 30 years ago. When I was born 40 years ago, we have Sha Tin and Dai Po and Zhangguango. These are new towns. New towns take efforts to build, and unfortunately, in the past 20 years,
we didn't do any of that.
We have no new towns. And as a result, therefore, we need to have massive effort, whether it's in new territories or reclamations, to build new towns. I mean, obviously, the government is doing, for example, Northeast Development, what they call NDA, and Hong Shui Kiu. These are bigger size, what they call new towns. But, they have been talking about it for 20 years. And Hong Shui Kiu, for example, they said they will be finished by 2038. 40 years, from the start to beginning. Yes, Hong Shui Kiu has a lot of brownfields, has some farmlands and a lot of different lands, but land assembly and then consultations, and it's good. They should do it, but they also should have, multi-point approach to consider other ways.
To have larger projects.
Yes.
Kevin, I want to ask you this, change subject slightly. As an economist, now, there's a lot of talk now that Hong Kong's future should be tied more closely to the Greater Bay Area. And I'm sure that the chief executive will be mentioning that as well in her policy speech. That, we used to be called Asia's World City. But it seems like some people say we've lost that international flavor already. And our future, and government officials and mainland officials have been saying that our future now lies with the Greater Bay Area. Is that a good idea? Rather than being an international city?
Well, the question is whether it's up to us to make the decision. There's stuff that's beyond our control. I think that based on what we've seen over the past year or two, it's a fact that we are losing our edge compared with some other Asian cities.
Especially
like
Shenzhen, right?
Yeah. Well, hang on. Compared with Singapore or some other cities in Asia. But then within China, I still think that we are more international than Shenzhen or Shanghai. The kind of people we have, we are very kind of worldwide people. Like Stephen went to Chicago for education, just like
you did too.
Me too. So the kind of people that we have, and you and as well, we speak English in here, and we understand the way Americans and Europeans think better, I think.
Why have we lost the edge?
We are losing the edge compared with other cities in China.
Is it because of bad governance in Hong Kong?
I think it's part of it. It's part of it.
That our government is not doing as well as Singapore and other places, Taiwan.
I agree.
You agree with that?
I agree with that.
Do you,
and we can do
Stephen?
better.
I think as a policy think tank, we always think that the government can do more, right? For example, you talk about finance, we're doing quite well, right? And technology, we need to catch up a lot, everybody knows. And even creative art industry, we have potential, but we are not.
Shenzhen was not as strong or powerful as Hong Kong before. And now even Xi Jinping and others have said that Shenzhen takes the lead.
I think
what went wrong?
Well, I don't think they're taking a lead in a sense. I think there is a chance to collaborate on technological innovations, right? So one of the advantages that Hong Kong has is our universities, right? With a lot of good basic research, which is the reason why we are now, ranked quite high globally, right? So there are some
but our rankings are dropping.
Well, there are some top-notch scientists in Hong Kong, right? That actually, the likes of Dennis Low, the like of others, right? That is obviously can take some of these scientific discovery and commercialize it through the technology transfer process. And the question then is whether GBA has something to offer so that we can connect and we can leverage each other.
Should Hong Kong people move to the Greater Bay Area to ease the housing shortage? I mean, that somebody's talked about that as well. That move out there, establish your lives there, get jobs there, and then home prices are cheaper in the Greater Bay Area.
From an economic point of view, we want to facilitate, two flows at the free will of people, optional. That is, whether coming to Hong Kong or going out to Shenzhen, right? So that people have more talent flow and capital and other sort of economic factors. Sort of the free flows. Those are generally good for economic development.
Okay. I've just got a few minutes left. Very quickly, do you think that with our reserves depleted, that Hong Kong government should raise taxes?
No, not at this point. No.
Why not?
We still have a lot of reserve. When compared with the rest of the world, our government financial is still doing great. Most government that we know are in deficit, huge deficit, but in Hong Kong it's not the case. Well, we can argue that it's local government, not a national government, but still I think we are okay. And the reason we accumulate so much reserve, part of it is because of to kind of, we know that every now and then, if not every year, but then maybe once in 10 years, then there will be recession and there will be negative shock like this one. And we did correctly to save the money so that now we have
we've got enough to do. Now, I've just got 2 minutes left. Stephen, I'm going to quickly turn to politics. During the policy speech tomorrow, none of the Democrats are going to be in that room. And it will be a policy speech purely of pro-establishment people. I'm going to ask the both of you to round up. Is that a good thing, Stephen?
Well, I think everything is politics, right? Like we just talked about, building for the future, investing in the infrastructure. I think obviously, as you said, different people have different views. My view is that we underinvested. We need to build a lot so that we have better lives in the future. What
about you? What do you think? I mean, is it good for Hong Kong that there is no opposition left?
Well, we'll see. I mean, but then to me, as an economist, it's a good experiment that we have about 1 year of time where there's no pro-Democrat legislative member, and then we're going to observe, let the Hong Kong people see, without them, just the pro-establishment politician, whether they can do a good job. And then I think it's not forever. It's going to be like one year.
And Stephen, I guess you will agree too that if there is no opposition, then a lot of the things like livelihood issues that you want to see passed will pass a lot quicker.
Again, we just need to focus on building. We deserve a better policy package so that we can help all the people in Hong Kong.
Now, how do we help all the people in Hong Kong? Doing what?
As I said, if the government can figure out some good policy to help to kind of calm the pandemic, then the economy is going to do their job to kind of do the recovery.
Well, let's hope that what will happen is that the pandemic will ease off, we'll have a vaccine, then the economy can revive, right? That I think is what's going to bring Hong Kong back. Right. Nothing. If the pandemic continues, that's not going to happen, right?
No, if this continues, it's not going to happen.
And people say that we don't raise a good prices to really sort of rethink how we can we adjust Hong Kong into a better future, earn more, live better.
Okay. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Good evening.